All right, Sandra, huh? It all happened with the Big Bang. That's how it all started. Do you know that?
I know that is a theory.
Yeah. Well, and now you know the theory of everything. And what a great show we have today. We have an author of a book called My Big Theory of Everything, or although he calls it My Big Toe, right? Isn't that pretty interesting? Toe is an acronym for, theory of everything.
Very cool.
Right? I thought it was pretty creative, So cute. But anyway, it's a great book and a great guest today, too. He's the coolest cat, actually, because how many nuclear physicists work for NASA government, right? And has been on this evolutionary spiritual journey while sharing and caring along the way with others. I mean, not many people.
I would say none, because I don't think I've ever met anyone that's worked at NASA.
It's like, you got to it reminds me of like Einstein, when Einstein says, you learn so much science and eventually you realize God does exist and is proven through science. And be curious to get our guest theory on that too here shortly. Actually, I saw him. He was, and I'll tell you his name. His name's Tom Campbell, and he was at Unity North years ago, and they were peddling a movie they made, a couple of movies I think, and I was going to think it was called Afterlife or something like that. And it was cool. It was like almost like a science approach or metaphysical science approach to death and what happens when you die or near-death experiences, testimonies from people when they go towards the light or life reviews and things like that. So it was, I personally, I showed my kids this. I showed many people I've watched one of the movies because I think, not many people talk about death.
Yeah.
Nobody ever wants to think about it until the last minute.
Right.
And like Eckhart Tolle says, when you die before you die, that's how you really start living,
Exactly.
You got to be not scared of death. It's just another
run to it.
Yeah, another movie theater to go into. So if you want to call in today and get involved in a really, really cool conversation with a really, really cool doctor, you could go to call 646-668-8246, 646-668-8246, dial 1 to raise your hand. Now, a few things I want to mention before we get into introducing formally our special guest today is, wow, what a weekend we had with the Vax team.
I'm telling you, I'm good luck, man.
You are. You really are. Didn't you love meeting Del Bigtree?
I loved that entire crew. There wasn't anyone on that crew that I would not love to hang out with.
Seriously. I mean, and amazing. And this is a group that, you had Michelle Ford, who was just this one little voice out there in California trying to organize, get somebody involved, learn about how the MMR vaccination is maiming and brain damaging little children, and how, we have a whistleblower, Dr. Thompson, come out and everything, and no one's listening. She contacted all the black caucuses out there in California. Nobody was saying anything until she went to the Nation of Islam, and then Farrakhan stood up and said, hey, I'm getting involved in this. And now you got a momentum going and getting the word out here and seeing the corruption level of the CDC and the FDA, what's going on that. So it's just amazing. And the Vax team, what brave souls. I
was just thinking that, that is a big step.
Who takes on Big Pharma and lives to tell the story? Not many people these days.
Yeah. And I used to work for Big Pharma, so
yeah. Right?
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was just a fantastic weekend. We have so much coming on. In fact, we have Minister Tony Muhammad, Shirley Easley, who was one of the ladies in the Vax movie, who had a vaccine-damaged son. She's going to be calling in on the show from California. And also, live in the studio, we have a co-producer of the movie Vax, Kelly Gallagher. She's coming in here and with Minister Tony Muhammad and getting into what's going on with the MMR vax and where they are, and kind of update from our last show we had on it, just to get the message out of people need to wake up that we may be being fooled here. The truth may not be as what you think it is. And so
she's coming back.
Yeah, she sure is.
I can't wait to hang out with her.
I know, right? So that we have coming up. Two other things I want to mention is November 9th, our summit, Fight for Your Health Summit, that the United Intentions Foundation is sponsoring here in Atlanta. And the more details will be coming out on that. And Jennifer has a lot of that, so she'll be able to share that. And it's going to be fantastic. It's basically focused on holistic solutions, from the bombardment, from the skies, the land, and the sea. It's like, we're being attacked from the sky, the land, and the sea. GMOs, chemtrails, fluoride, vaccines. What can you do? It's all about what can you do to really send yourself, and a lot has to do with your emotional, mental state too.
Yeah.
And this is really, I want to get into some conversations with how our guest today prepares for that too, mentally and meditation-wise, because this guy, I'm talking about he's out there. He goes out-of-body experiences. We're getting really into that too today.
Oh, he's up there with Yogananda.
Oh, he's going to blow your mind. Plus, he's all science behind it. It's like my perfect cat, man.
He's all about you.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the woo-woo girl.
Yeah.
True woo-woo girl, and you're the science guy.
I'm the science guy, right?
Yeah.
And okay, last thing I want to mention, too, is Teal Swan. A lot of folks may not know Teal Swan. She's a newcomer to the scene. Brilliant woman. I don't want to say psychic because she doesn't. I think she calls herself a sensitive, and she is able to see lights. She sees energies, and she has such wisdom. You can catch her on Teal Swan and go on YouTube and get prepared for that. But she's going to show live October 28th, and we're really excited about getting some real work, internal work. She's the type of person who believes in facing your shadow, doing your shadow work, facing that dark side, not be one of those denial-based positive thinkers. She really says, hey, you know what? You got work to do. Whatever is happening outside of yourself or within yourself, you got to address it. You got to look at it. You can't deny it. And then you grow from there. You don't stay there. You move and grow on. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the last thing I want to mention, I say one more thing, sorry, is we got a new cruise director on our site. Her name's Sandra Hunt.
Oh, wow.
Yay, little round of applause for Sandra Hunt. And you're doing wonderful. And what we're doing is getting engagement on the site and trying to get getting the people started on learning how to create their intentions, using their thoughts,
knowing the language,
and dealing with your subconscious obstacles, what you're believing. And also, she's starting her own new radio show here on the United Intentions Network. It's called the
Manifestation Show or Manifesting Show.
The Manifestation Show.
I always decide on Manifestation Show.
The Manifestation Show. Come on. Is that cool? Where you can have live manifestations happening right there. We're going to be talking about it in present tense as if it's already happening, and you're going to be creating intentions on the site, and then we're going to have special guests come on and walk them through their manifestation as if it's happening for an hour period of time. So what a great idea and what a great hit, and you're going to be a perfect host for that show.
Well, thank you. And our first guest is going to be the one and only.
Tim Ray, talking about United Intentions. There we go. Talk about United Intentions. I'll tell you who totally has that down and understands the process is our guest today, Tom Campbell. He's a nuclear physicist, began researching altered states of consciousness with Bob Monroe, Journeys Out of the Body. And Bob Monroe started the Monroe Institute. In fact, he was one of the original guys who started out with him, or at least came on early there. Far Journeys and the Ultimate Journey at Monroe Laboratories in the early 1970s. And it's tough because this man's only like 30 years old. I mean, I don't know how that works, but you know, he's managed to stay that young for that long. And a few others with instrumental in getting Monroe's Laboratory for the Study of Conscious up and running. These early drug-free conscious pioneers, Big Pharma doesn't like that, helped design experiments developed, and I guess you're referring to not like Tim Leary type of guys back then.
Yeah.
Helped design experiments, develop technology for creating specific altered states, and remain subjects of study guinea pigs at all at the same time. Tom is the TC physicist described in Bob Monroe's second book, Far Journeys. Campbell has been a serious explorer of frontiers of reality mind, consciousness, and psychic phenomenon for the last 40 years. Is this not incredible? We had this guy for an hour today. There's so much we got to talk about. So much.
I might monopolize the conversation and do all that.
I will shut you down. Don't worry. Using his I have the control over here. Using his acquired mastery of out-of-body experience as a research tool, Campbell focused his work toward discovering the outer boundaries and inner works and the causal dynamic of larger reality system. The result of the research unites the worlds of objective and subjective experience under one scientific explanation, thus achieving the goal of generating one unified, comprehensive theory of everything. The big toe. That bridges metaphysics and physics with one scientific understanding. And the author of My Big Toe. So without further ado, let me welcome let's give a warm welcome, a nuclear warm welcome for the first time at Good Attention Show, and hopefully many more times, Tom Campbell. Tom, how are you?
Well,
how are you doing?
Thank you, Tim. That was quite an introduction.
Little did you know. Well, great to have you here. Little did you know you had some big fans here from Georgia watching you. I'm sure you do know you have a lot of them, but we are a big one, and me specifically, I really dig what you're doing, and I'd so much to know, and you have such a great presence about you, and your knowledge is just unprecedented. And just by the way, I want people to know if he's also Tom Campbell is having a LA workshop coming up on this month on the 29th and the 30th. And if you want to have a chance to go to the workshop, we'll mention it later on too. You go to mbtla.com. That's M as in Mary, B as in boy, T as in Tom, LA.com, and you could actually get to his workshop out there. So Well, Tom, where do we start? How about this? How about we start the Monroe Institute? Because I just find that so fascinating. A lot of folks that I talk to in my circles, they know about it, but a lot of folks do not. Is there any way you can maybe do for a beginner listening the first time, maybe explain, not a long explanation, but explain the Monroe Institute and what kind of pulled you in that direction back then? And I know it wasn't Timothy Leary's LSD drug, so it was having something else, right? I'm sure.
No, I was, I was a brash young physicist in my late 20s, and I took meditation from transcendental meditation folks and learned that my mind was a whole lot more than I thought it was. And I surprised myself that very quickly after meditating, maybe a few months in, I was able to decode computer code in my mind much faster than I could if I was actually sitting in front of the cards. And in those days, it wasn't a computer. We didn't have personal computers. We had boxes of punch cards. And rather than sit in front of 4,000 punch cards and try to figure out which ones were wrong and where the errors were, I could bring it all up in my mind, and the ones that were wrong would stand out as red against the rest that were regular black type. And I just learned, I knew my code because I wrote it, so I know where those were. I could pick them out, and sure enough, those were the ones that had problems. So that just surprised me to no end, because as a physicist, I kind of had the same idea that most scientists have, and that is if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist and it isn't important. So I realized that was wrong, and that there was a lot bigger there's a lot more to reality than what I had thought. And after I got out of graduate school, my boss gave me a book called Journeys Out of the Body. And he said, read this, Tom, and tell me what you think. Well, when your boss tells you that, particularly when you're new, you're not quite sure what the right answer is. So I read it, and I told him, I said, well, there's no way to know whether this guy's making it up, or whether he's a hustler trying to sell books or what, but it sure would be interesting to know whether it's real or not. As it turned out, Bob Monroe was only about 45 minutes away from where I lived and worked. So a bunch of us from the office went out to see the wizard and see if he was for real. And we not only found out he was for real, but he had just finished building a lab and wanted to study consciousness, because this out-of-body thing just happened to him. He couldn't not do it. It scared him to death. He went to a psychiatrist and said, am I going nuts? Eventually, he just accepted it and began to play with it and realized that it was something very real. He could gather information in that state and check it out, and sure enough, he'd been there. So that was, I guess we now call that remote viewing, but you also can do that from out of body. So I volunteered to be a scientist at his lab, and the condition was I'd do the experiments and the protocols and make sure all the science was straight, and he would teach myself and Dennis, another person worked where I did, he would teach us what he knew about going out of body, because if you don't experience it, if it's not your experience, then it's not your truth. So we realized we had to try at least to do those same things. Well, Bob was a good teacher, and after 6 months or a year or so, Dennis and I were able to go out of body when we wanted to, and started to explore. And that began what Monroe Institute called the Explorer Program, which was several people. It wasn't just Dennis and I, but other people came in time, and all of us were out exploring this larger consciousness system. Well, I'm a scientist. I'm a physicist, and what I do is try to figure out how reality works. That's what scientists do. That's what physicists do anyway. So I kept probing at it and pushing at it, and how far does this thing go, and how wide is it, and what can it do, what can it do, and why? Why is it like that? Why is it even there? What do we here in this reality have to do with, the larger consciousness system? What's the connection? So I worked on that from both sides. Mainly, though, from the out-of-body side, from the non-physical side, because I could test it. As I came up with theories, I could actually test it inside of the larger consciousness system to see just what was going on. Was it repeatable? What were the variables, that kind of thing. And some 35 to 40 years later, I figured I understood it. I guess I'm kind of a slow learner, but it took me a long time to puzzle it out. And then in 2002, I wrote these books, My Big Toe. It's a series of 3 books, a trilogy. And that was supposed to be my theory, really, of the larger conscious system. It's a theory of consciousness. But about a year or two after they were published, I had an aha moment where I realized that the exact same principles, the exact same ideas and concepts that the way I described consciousness also derived physics, that I could take these same ideas and explain why particles should be probability distributions, which is a big mystery in quantum mechanics. Why C is a constant, which is a big mystery in relativity theory. Why all these things that are kind of paradoxes in physics suddenly became perfectly clear. So then I realized that if you understand consciousness, you can derive physics from it. Not only that, I found out that if you understand consciousness, you can derive an awful lot of theology from it. You can see in the world's religions what really is there that makes sense, what's kind of core understanding, and what's nonsense, what's dogma, and what's just stuff that's been added over the thousands of years since the original creators had their big ideas. So the whole world kind of fell open to a very scientific explanation. So now I could scientifically explain, what is out of body and what is remote viewing and how do they work? How come people's intents, back to United Intentions Foundation, how do people's intents modify reality? What's the placebo effect? How does that work? When your doctor tells you that you're gonna get well from these new magic pills, and you really do, that's called the placebo effect, and we know that that works, and we know a lot of other intention modifies future probability works, but nobody actually knows why. Well, I could see why it happens. It's just that's physics now. That's understandable.
Let me ask you a question about consciousness too, since that's a big piece of it. And we had Dr. Bruce Lipton on a little while ago, and he mentioned a great little analogy that imagine your body is a television set, and consciousness is the broadcast. And so your television set is picking up on this broadcast, right? The consciousness. But and now say the television set breaks down and dies. It's like a human dies. Does the broadcast go away? No, the broadcast is still there, just waiting for another frequency and antenna to pop up with that same frequency to actually take in the broadcast. That will probably when you're referring to consciousness, you're referring more so to that broadcast, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I'd give you a little different metaphor. That was a good one that Bruce gave. Bruce is a great fella, by the way. Spent some time. We did an interview together some years back. But anyway, think of playing a virtual reality game. So here you're playing virtual reality game, and your character is an elf, and your elf is doing all sorts of things, mostly fighting monsters and that sort of thing. Is what you do in those kinds of games. And your elf gets killed. Well, the elf is like your body. You, the player, are like the elf's consciousness. And when the elf gets killed, well, you sitting there with your hand on the mouse and the joystick, it doesn't exactly kill you. You just go on and you get another elf is what you do. Or resurrect that one. You go on. So yes, it's the same idea. There really is no such thing as death outside of this virtual reality that we call our physical universe. So in that little picture, yes, avatars die, but in the big picture, the player just keeps on playing. So
it's like that,
death is local.
It's like that quote from Jim Carrey in his speech when he says, "We're not the avatars that we create." That?
Right. Let me ask a question about the wave formation, and when you observe it, you bring that wave formation, whatever area, that probability, to a particle, to matter. Is the consciousness outside of this probability, or is the consciousness is the probability wave? The consciousness
is the whole system. There really is no wave. This idea of the probability wave is a metaphor, not a fact. It's not an actual thing. It's just the way people describe it. You have a virtual reality. This world that we live in The Buddha said it about 2,500 years ago. This physical world is an illusion, and that is accurate. It is. So when the physicists talk about a probability wave representing a particle, and then when you make a measurement, that probability wave collapses into a physical particle, that's really just a metaphor. None of that's going on. This is a virtual reality. There is no such thing really as a physical particle. It's a virtual particle. It's a virtual apparatus. It's a virtual, electron gun or whatever is making the particles. It's a virtual building that you're in, and all the characters and all the players and all the physicists in their white lab coats are all virtual characters. They're all avatars. So you have to realize that consciousness is the only thing that's fundamental. Everything else is virtual.
An illusion. So let's take the out-of-body experience along with your metaphor, and let's use that for our listeners to kind of get a better comprehension of, and maybe use one of your, if you have reoccurring out-of-body experiences, or maybe one of your fascinating out-of-body experiences that you've had over the years or continue to have, and use the avatar as what would the experience look like as you're describing an out-of-body experience.
Okay, now, when you play World of Warcraft, you're getting a data stream from a computer. There's some server someplace that's creating that World of Warcraft game. And what it's doing is it's sending your computer a stream of data. Now, you're the consciousness, and you're the player, okay, sitting at your computer, and you're getting a stream of data from a server that is creating that virtual reality game. You look at the screen, interpret that data to be this World of Warcraft world, and you want your player to jump or do something. So you send that, you do that by moving your mouse, say it a little to the right, and that means your player looks right. So you send that information to the computer. The computer makes that player look right, and when he looks right, of course, he sees different things. He may run into something, or he may see something that he needs when he looks right. So it also computes the consequences of that act, and then it sends that back to you as data, and you look at what the elf sees. So it's just this data exchange. This reality we're in is just a data exchange with a server, if you will. Going out of body is just connecting to a different data stream. You see, there really is no body, and it's not like your consciousness lives inside your body. It doesn't, any more than you don't live inside your elf when you're playing World of Warcraft. You're just the elf's consciousness. So when you go out of body, you are just letting go of the data stream that's playing World of Warcraft, and you're going over to the data stream that's, say, playing The Sims. Now you're out of body from World of Warcraft, and now you're in a body over at Sims. Now you're you're a guy there with a short haircut and works as a policeman in The Sims.
Right.
Okay, now that's out of body as far as being in the World of Warcraft. You've just gone to a different data stream. Well, there's lots of different data streams out there. This virtual reality of ours, this physical reality, is just one spot in a much, much bigger information system that has lots of different games going on, lots of different data streams, and with your intent, you can connect to one of these other data streams. And it starts out when you're first learning this, that trying to let go of this data stream is kind of a hard thing to do. It's a thing, takes some practice and meditation and that sort of thing. Eventually, it's not a hard thing to do. You can do it in an instant. You can do it in less than a second. You can switch data streams. And eventually, after you've done that for some years, you really don't live in any particular virtual reality at all anymore. You live in a lot of them. You kind of live in a bigger space so that you're kind of plugged into a larger reality than just this physical reality, and your life is just like that. So I guess that makes you a little strange because you're not just here. You're here in other places as well, and that's a bigger picture. You see things now from a bigger perspective, and when you do, most everything gets a lot simpler and a lot easier. So what's the experience like? It's just like, it depends on where you're going and what you're going to see, and an awful lot of it has to do with your intent. So if your intention, let's say you're fearful you're a very fearful person and you leave this reality, you're going to run into things that are scary because you've got fear. That your intent now is about negative things, so you'll run into negative things. If you have, you have to explore to know where to go and what intents will get you where, and that's just a matter of exploration and taking the time to, flesh out a map.
So, Tom, give us an example of an out-of-body experience that you've had either recently or one that you'd like to share or talk about, and just kind of walk us through like how you prepare yourself for it now, since you're I guess an expert at it, and then tell us how your experience is, and then we'll talk about how maybe a beginner can get introduced to it.
Okay.
Give some details. Details.
Right
Where you go, what do you do, who do you see?
Yeah. Well, it's all
were you dressed? Were you naked? What was going on at the time?
It depends on what you want to do. So we have to take a specific case. It's not like, the out-of-body thing has to do with your intent and your focus. So if, let's say, somebody walks up to me and they, maybe they introduce themselves and say that they're very concerned because their Aunt Sally just got diagnosed with some terrible thing, and, they're telling me about that and so on, and about Aunt Sally. And as they're talking to me and I'm talking to them, there's part of me that's not engaged in the conversation. I split that down to probably just whatever I need to carry on the conversation and listen to it, and that's maybe 20% of my focus. With the other, with another, 50 or 60%, I go and take a look at her aunt, his Aunt Sally, and I see what's going on with Aunt Sally. I get a picture of her history. I look at her health. I can see a graph that says, how good the health is as a function of time, what's likely to happen to her over the next year or the 2 years or 3 years. Is she going to get better? Is she going to get worse? And the origins of the problem. And so I can get all that data and get a sense of Aunt Susie and what she's about and her personality and her character. So I can get all that at the same time this person is talking to me, because that's available in this out-of-body state. That's available in the non-physical. That's part of consciousness. The consciousness system keeps track of information. There's a future probability database, and there's a past database, and you can get around in these databases and collect all sorts of information. So in that case, I'm just, I'm not actually going someplace and looking around as it is, and I'm just collecting data because that's what's pertinent to this particular thing. Sometimes I can tell you in a time, this was decades ago, when I was trying to figure out whether these databases were actually real places, ongoing places, or whether they were something else. And I went to the past. So I looked at the past, and I was playing with these past databases. And you can go back and relive and re-experience something that you did 100 years ago or 500 years ago or whatever, in past lives, in this life. Then you can do what-if analysis. Well, what if I, had done this differently? How would my life have worked out after that? And you can run these what-if scenarios. And I realized that this wasn't really a live production with characters that had free will. This was a database, and it just had information, and it had probability. That's how you could query it that way. So it's not that
who needs video
games?
games?
Database is live. It's just that it's there, but you can get into it and experience it like you're an actor in the movie, like you're part of it. It seems live, but it really isn't. It's a database.
So Tom, who needs video games when what you're saying is when you get yourself in a state where you have an out-of-body experience, you could actually travel not only outside of your body in other areas in the present time, but also you could travel in the past, relive experiences in the past, this life or past life, also, or you could travel in the future and even into a future self too, right? So
that's a future
fascinating.
Probability now. It's not the future like the future's a done deal. We do have free will, and this future hasn't happened yet, so it can all change. But there is a database that has what's probable, and the further out you get, then the rattier those predictions are. But so you have to understand that. But you can travel. You can query that database. So you want to look at what's the most probable happenings given these conditions, what's the most probable happening? Let's say the answer is he's health. Is she going to get better or is she going to get worse? So that's getting data out of the future probable database. Yes, but that's not necessarily exactly what's going to happen. That's just what's likely to happen at this point in time, the way we're looking at it.
That's how psychics work.
Now.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
To me, so I live in the kind of more woo-woo world, or what we're now calling the true world, where I think Tim's more scientific. And, I've worked with theta healers and mediums and that, and it sounds like to me this is more the scientific explanation for what they can do, or what they're doing, what we're all capable of doing. They just somehow were born with some kind of access to it without really realizing that's what
their
it
antenna
was.
was bigger.
Yes,
maybe
exactly.
They were born in
right.
a more clear field or something. Yeah,
they just practice at it. Sometimes they come in and you're right, they're just a little, initially they're just better at it and get there quicker than other people. But other times they just practice and they know what works and what doesn't. And eventually, if anything that you practice at long enough, you get good at. So
Tom, when we get back from break,
they're accessing databases.
Yeah. Tom, when we get back from break, let's talk about perhaps a quick scenario or a quick explanation how somebody who's never done an out-of-body experience, how they could perhaps start doing it, just maybe the 1, 2, 3 steps on it, and my God, why sit in front and watch television anymore? Why play video games? Why just lay in bed all day long? Now, see, I can lay in bed now all day long and have a purpose rather just being lazy. You see, I like this idea. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell, hold on. It's great, is it?
Mark your calendars. November 9th, 2016. Don't miss the Fight for Your Health Summit at the Quality Inn in Buckhead Village, featuring an expert panel on empowering and enlightening topics in 2 sessions. The morning session, 9:30 to 11:30, featuring Dr. Judy Mikovits, author, scientist, health advocate, Timothy Ray, founder of the United Intentions Foundation, Jennifer Garnett, holistic doctor. The afternoon session, 1:30 to 3:30, features Dr. Miriam Croft, chiropractor, Loli Heimberg, speaker, writer, nutritionist, and Timothy Ray, founder of UIF. Get your tickets now at eventbrite.com. Fight for Your Health Summit. Sponsored by United Intentions Foundation and Hands On Wellness. Hope to see you there.
All right, we are back with Tom Campbell, the nuclear physicist, gone out-of-body experience. And I'll tell you what, that is fascinating. I am just, I'm remotivated. I had a out-of-body experience years ago when I was in college, and kind of freaked me out a little bit. And I never had it again. I think I just shocked.
Really?
Yeah, I was in college and I was practicing because I was reading up on it, right? And I was elevated out of my body, and I started looking up above the dorms and what's above there. I was looking in there, and then all of a sudden I felt this this fear, this satanic fear feeling, and then boom, I snapped myself right back into it. And I never explored it then. I must have really just shocked myself, or didn't realize, maybe I'll get past that. I don't know.
A block.
Yeah, there's a block, but we'll talk to the Dr. Campbell about it. Now, Doc, Tom, there's also a way to reach you too, is nbtevents.com, right? And also nbto.com.
Right, nbtevents.com, www.nbtevents.com is the website of the people who do all of my scheduling and talks and places to go and that sort of thing. So if you really wanted to find out about NBTLA, you could go there, and they would have things on that there. And then mybigtoe.com is my own website, and that'll take you'll find a link there to go to YouTube, where I have lots and lots of videos. Every time I do anything, workshop, interviews, lots and lots of things that I do, they end up on YouTube. So everything is free and everything's available. Indeed, this program is likely to end up on YouTube as well.
There you go, and it's going to be a live one. We're just getting started too. So Tom, give us a little 1, 2, 3 if somebody wants to go home tonight and then try an out-of-body experience. And it doesn't have to be at nighttime. It could be any time, right?
Okay. Right. Well, you can do this anytime, right? And eventually, you can do it even when you're having a conversation with other people or walking around or whatever. You don't really have to be in bed.
But
to start with, though, the thing is we make it hard. It's really not such a hard thing to do, but we make it very difficult because we don't know what to expect. We don't know what it's going to be like. And without that idea, what happens is we start to kind of get fuzzy, and you start to lose your normal consciousness. You get into what's called a hypnagogic state. Most people get into that just before they fall asleep, or maybe you see images or other things. And what happens is that then people their intellect gets back into it. They go, oh, what was that? Oh, am I out of body now? Oh, no, I don't think so. And they start questioning, and they get out of that being level, just existing space, and get into, am I doing it right? What should I do next? Is this it? Oh, I'm not doing it right. I'm just lying here. And that is what keeps them from actually doing it. It's all that jabber of that intellect trying to control the process. You see, you have to let the process just happen. You don't, if you try to control it with your intellect, that just gets in the way. And, all the people that Sandra was talking about, the mediums, the people who heal and so on, they know how to slip into that space. And they know how to let go of this reality frame with their intellect, let the intellect kind of sit down and be quiet while they pursue that inner space more from the being level. And actually, we find that ladies are a little more attached to their being level than guys are. Guys are a little more attached to their intellects when it comes to this sort of thing. So that's why you probably find 5 female mediums for every male medium, because it's just a little more natural for them to do that. But yes, it's a matter of letting go, having no expectations, and when you let go of this reality frame, basically means you just let all the sense data go to where you're no longer operating on it, then you're not here anymore. At that point, you're just consciousness floating in the void. So that's step number 1, is to, whether it's through meditation or just sitting quietly or just letting your mind kind of go blank, however you want to approach it, that's kind of up to you. But the first step is to learn how to get to a point where you are nothing but a point of consciousness floating in a black void. What that means is you've let go of your sense data. You no longer hear, see, feel anything. And if you do, let's say you're doing this in your house and outside on the street, somebody honks a horn, you may hear that. But that's okay. That won't disturb you as long as you don't operate on it. As long as you don't get your intellect going, who's that? Oh, somebody's beeping the horn. What a nuisance. Right now while I'm trying to meditate. You see, now you basically leave that being level state and get back into an intellectual state. But if you can just let that horn be and don't operate on it, so it's there but you're not attached to it in any way, then that'll work fine. So you just let this reality go. And when you're just floating there in the void, it's a very blissful, very relaxing kind of state. And when people first do that, they really don't want to do much of anything else for a while, because it just feels really good to be in that total state of relaxation and being, where you feel just, completely at ease.
Isn't that meditation? Isn't that meditation when you lose your mind, you leave your mind? I mean, what's the distinction between in a meditative state versus out of body experience?
Transcending.
See, there isn't anything. When you leave this, it'd be better to call it an out of mind state really than an out of body state. But that has other connotations, so we don't do that. But anyway, what it is you're letting it go.
You get a straitjacket put on when that happens.
Yeah, right. But you just let go of the sense data here. And when you do that, you're not here anymore. So that's why you're floating in the void. Now all you have to do is have an intent, not from the intellect, but from the being level. And you have this intent, and when you do that, then that starts to program you to do other things. So if what your intention is to go visit Aunt Susie who's ill, then there you are. You're right there wherever Aunt Susie is. And you can see what she's doing or where she's going. You can call that remote viewing, but remote viewing and lucid dreaming, they're all first cousins of out of body. They differ mostly by the process in which you get there and by the limitations that you put on it through your own beliefs. But basically, you are no longer in your body. You've never really been in your body anyway, right? It's not that consciousness doesn't live in your body. So, but you're out of your body when you are no longer operating on sense data.
That is so fascinating, and it seems so simple. The way you explain it, and I guess the more I believe what you're saying, how easy it is, the more likely I'll have that experience because it's all the placebo effect or the nocebo effect or whatever you want to call it. It's intention. But what's one of the biggest obstacles, I guess, why people are experiencing in dream state, but a lot of times they're not experiencing in wake state because of their ego gets in the way? What's the big obstacles here?
It's there's several big obstacles. One of them is fear. Fear is the biggest obstacle. Fear of the unknown. When you were, up above the campus there and you're out of body, and suddenly you realize, here I am at, 3,000 feet, and oh my God, what am I doing up here?
What the hell am I doing
up here? Am I dead? Well, I'd be dead if I don't get back. Well, I fall, and you have all this stuff then rushes in your mind. It's all that fear is the problem. And there's many people who will finally get out of body just to run into some terrible thing, a monster or this or that or something evil. And all that is it's their own fear. They are materializing. When you're in that out-of-body realm, what you think, what your mind does, has a lot of force. Talk about manifesting things. You can manifest on a dime there. If you're thinking fearful things, you'll find fearful things. So it's a very, it's not as tight a space as it is in the physical reality. Here, manifestation takes a lot longer time. There, it's pretty instantaneous. So if you're a fearful person, you'll find fearful things.
Right.
If you're not a fearful person,
you won't. But you really have to mentally prepare yourself before you have an out-of-body experience to be in that state of love or that state of higher frequency or the state of that love vibration. Because if you go in just it's hard enough to hold our thoughts here in our present moment, Tom. Can you imagine now in a dream state where you're manifesting hand over foot immediately? So, I would say there's probably some prep work. You teach people how to do prep work for that?
It does take a lot. It has a lot of conditioning. What you have to do is get rid of the fear. And when you get rid of fear, you also get rid of a lot of ego, and you have to get rid of beliefs. So you just have to be open, empty, and accessible without trying to read anything into it or put anything into it. It's just be. That's the thing you have to do is just be without fear, without the intellect.
Right.
Go ahead, Sandra.
So what about the people? I'm sorry. What about the people who are the complete opposite? That they're open, they want to have this experience, but they can't get there. Because I know a lot of people. They're so curious about this type of experience.
Fear has to be there then. Unconscious fear. The fear, I guess, of doing it wrong. I don't.
The problem that they have, it could be fear of the unknown. That's always a big one. It's someplace very scary because you've never been there before. But mainly what they do is that they have a problem with expectation. They have read books, they've heard stories, they've read books, and they have expectations of sort of what they think it's going to be like or what other people's experiences have been. So that's what they're expecting. Okay, they're expecting to repeat those kinds of stories, but you have to, it's personal. It's what's in your mind and your intent. So if you are, let's say the first thing you do when you let go is you see, a yellow daisy, growing up out of the ground. It's about 6 feet tall, and there's a 4 foot tall rabbit standing next to it, and when you look at it, the rabbit winks at you. Now, most people, when they see that, would say, what a bunch of nonsense. I'm imagining that, something out of, a Looney Tunes movie or something. Well, that's the wrong thing to do. What you do is you engage it. You go say, well, what's that about? And you wink back, you see. And then maybe you go over. And what you can find if you engage in these things, that one thing will lead you to another thing, to another thing. But we tend to blow it all off as our imagination or let's say we're trying to communicate with someone, and we hear a voice. We get information. The first thing we do is say, "What was that? Was that my imagination? Did I just make that up, or did I hear something?" Well, now you're completely gone out of the state. So you see, you've lost it. So people have expectations, and they want to know immediately whether or not they're doing it right, whether they're meeting the expectation, or whether they're making it up in their mind. And that's the problem. So people who are open and want to have the experience, that what they're doing wrong is they're not just having the experience, whatever it is, and don't have anything in your mind that you expect to happen. Just be and see what does happen. And if something silly happens, well, interact with it. Be part of it. Go with it. Become one with the rabbit and the flower. You see, move into it. Don't judge it and then cast it aside because it wasn't like what you read about. That's the problem that most people have.
Right. No, that makes complete sense, and it's fascinating because it's such a simple thing to do. It doesn't cost you any money. You don't have to pay for it. You don't have to go to a guru to figure it out. I mean, you can just do it yourself, and we're always looking for answers outside of ourselves. But one thing you mentioned was with the limiting of the beliefs, right? And that could be a big obstacle for holding people back. And, like, I want to get your thoughts on this, okay, Tom, is a lot of humanity have the believe that their purpose here or their experience here is to learn how to ascend into a spiritual self or find out how they're ascending into the spiritual higher frequency thinking, versus more of a some and minority believe more so is that perhaps we're here to descend into the physical body, to creating an environment in a heaven on earth where our spiritual self will descend into this body and be able to be in that frequency of love, where people would more and if that is the case, the second is the case, would that explain why a lot of people may not be as engaged in this three-dimensional world and events that are going on in their present life that may not be so positive? But whereas if they felt that they were descending into a spiritual, into the spirit, creating heaven on earth, they'd be more likely to show up and try to make change for a or higher frequency world down here. I mean, what's your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, well, neither of those are exactly right, but both have elements in them that are sort of right, but neither one are really right. What it is that we are individuated units of consciousness. We're a piece of this larger consciousness system. We're just a part of it. Okay, a chip off the old block, if you like. And we have a mission here, and that mission is to evolve the quality of our consciousness. Now, in the science terms, we look at a consciousness system is an information system, and information means ordered bits, and no information means random bits. So the information system needs to lower its entropy, which means more order, more information, less randomness. So we can look at it from the scientific viewpoint, but what that translates to is that what we're here to do is to grow up, to evolve in a positive way. Because consciousness has all these individuated units of consciousness, it's a social system. The way a social system evolves positively, the way it, let's say, lowers its entropy to the greatest extent, is by being cooperative, interactive, helpful. It's about other, not about self. The way it increases its entropy, that means kind of dissolves, goes away, dies, is by being self-focused, self-centered. It's all about me. I'm the center of my universe. It's all about me. So that then translates into, what are we here for? We're here to care. We're here to become love. We're here to grow up spiritually, and that's our purpose. And we are a piece of the system's strategy for doing that. This consciousness system needs to evolve. It's like, it either evolves, which lowers its entropy, becomes, the pieces all become more love-like, or it de-evolves, which means, more randomness, no trust, the self-centeredness, then it de-evolves, and that's toward fear. So fear and love are the opposites of each other. We're here because as we evolve in this virtual reality entropy reduction trainer that we're in, that we call our physical reality, as we evolve, making our choices more toward helping, cooperation, caring, these kinds of things, then we are lowering the entropy of the whole system. So we're part of the system's way of evolving. So that's our purpose here.
So can you evolve without action? Can you evolve with, let's say you see something, a lady being mugged on the street, or something, a negative reality that a lot of people don't want to look at, whatever may be occurring in the three-dimensional world. Can you evolve without taking action when these situations happening, whether it's that or it's taking down the farm, big farm or whatever? Can you evolve without action, or is that one of the reasons why we're in this three-dimensional world, is to take inspired action?
Well, no, we are here to interact, because here we have more obvious choices with feedback. You see, when we're just all individuated units of consciousness interacting, that's like we're all in a great big chat game. We can pass information back and forth, but there's really no traction in that as far as you're growing. You don't have any feedback. You're sending out messages, you get messages, but there's very little that you can make of that as far as growing up, as far as lowering the entropy of your consciousness. So that's why this virtual reality was created, so that consciousness could play these avatars, these bodies of ours, because here you have a very tight rule set, and you have experiences, and you have feedback from those experiences. So yes, when you see that lady being mugged, you not only can evolve by doing something, you have to do something. You see, you can't just say, oh, well, lady getting mugged, not me. I'll just walk on the other side of the street and that mugger will stay busy with that lady, then it's not going to, I'll get by. That's not the way it works. Now, you don't have to be stupid about things. You're not going to, jump off a cliff because you're fearless. That's not being fearless. That's being stupid. So, there's... So you see a reality to have it. Okay. You're here to have to make choices. And sometimes those choices, well, most of the time, those choices have a moral edge to them. And that moral edge is that if it helps you evolve toward love, then that's good. That's a moral choice. If it helps you de-evolve, if it's a high entropy choice, then that's an immoral choice. That's how you tell good from bad, moral from immoral, is the effect that it has on your evolution as consciousness. So yes, we're here to experience. We're here to interact. We're here to learn. This is an entropy reduction trainer for individuated units of consciousness. So that's why we're here. And surely we do have to make those choices that fall on the side of love. If we make them otherwise, then we are de-evolving.
Right. That's interesting, because I see a lot of folks there's a lot of negative realities potentially going on, although I believe there's a lot more positive realities going on. But a lot of things I see people choosing to have this kind of denial-based positive thinking, where I don't want to focus on anything negative, which I understand, because I don't want to attract that frequency. But when there's something negative going on, like the lady being mugged, you could just say, well, I'm not going to attract that. I'm just going to walk away from it. But you already attracted it already, didn't you? On some level. So if that negative reality or that shadow work is there for you to look at, isn't it best to look at it, take action with it, rather than to ignore it?
Absolutely. And that's a pretty dramatic one, seeing somebody getting mugged. That's a very dramatic action. But we have thousands of little choices during the day, and we have to take responsibility for every one of those choices. And typically we don't take responsibility. We, point our finger at somebody else and blame them. So, you'd say, Susie makes me really angry. She said this, and that makes me angry. Well, you have to realize that nobody can make you angry. You have to choose to be angry. And if you choose to be angry, that's a poor choice. That's a choice toward fear, not a choice toward love. So we make lots of choices all the time. And the one with the lady being mugged is just such an obvious, choice that, of course, you're going to help do what you can to help that situation. But there's millions of other little choices that you have day by day that offer that same choice. Are you going to move toward fear or moving toward love? You make choices out of fear, they're poor choices. You make poor choices out of caring, respect, that's out of love, then those are good choices. And it doesn't matter so much what happens as it does what you do with what happens. So it's not so much, well, if I go over there and help, maybe I'll get hurt too. That's not the point. The point is that you have to do the right thing.
Yeah. And to each person, I guess, is the right thing and wrong thing is their own equivalent morality. But there, we had more time. We have a couple minutes left. But if we had more time, I'd want to get into some of the universal laws and principles. But before we head out, I do want to ask you a couple of other personal questions. Tom, what do you do for fun? Like, what's fun for Tom Campbell in any given day? What brings you joy in your life?
Everything brings me joy in my life. My life is just one unending string of fun, and I'm going to have a lot of fun out here in LA in a couple of weeks, and that's what I do that really is the most fun for me is talking to people and helping them see a bigger picture that can help them have more fun and have more joy in their life. So connecting with people, being of value, being useful generally is what's fun for me. Well,
you sure brought value and making it fun for us today. And I'll tell you, that is, if you want to have fun with Tom Campbell, you can always go out to LA to or go to mbtla.com, mbtla.com, and start having some fun, because you know what? That is why we're here, to have fun and to explore and to learn, right? And to experience and to interact and to love. Right? Comes down to it, doesn't it?
And if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. If your life is not just joyful and just having a lot of fun and a lot of satisfaction, then you're not doing it right. And it's not that other people aren't doing it right. That's not the point. It's that you're not doing it right.
Sure. Well, Tom, I had about 30,000 more questions for you. Will you come back in the future sometime?
Well, sure. This is. When you write a book called The Theory of Everything, it's really hard to cover that in an hour.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a good point. Yeah. The Theory of Everything. Theory of Everything done in 1 hour. Tom Campbell.
Yeah.
But no, you're fantastic, and I really appreciate everything you're doing. I know the world appreciates what you're doing, because it's so needed now more than ever before. I call it a crisis of perception out there, what's going on, and if you could just shift your perception as you teach people how to do, everything changes, and that's how we change the world. Do you agree?
I agree completely.
All right, Tom, listen, thank you so much. I want you to have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Tom. All right, guys.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. And we have some great stuff coming up. I can't even tell you what's coming up this week. I don't have time to say, but we have the Vax team coming in. We got Phil Watts calling in from Australia tomorrow, getting some heavy, deep consciousness and belief, and he's more of a kind of activist action guy. But it's just going to be fascinating stuff. And then Friday, of course, Susan's coming back about self-help. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Busy week. Take care.
You have been listening to The Good Intention Show on the UI Radio Network. The Good Intention Show is sponsored by the United Intentions Foundation at unitedintentions.org. Look for us on Blog Talk, Spreaker, iTunes, Stitcher, Player FM, and many more. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram under United Intentions, and on Twitter at Higher Intention. Be sure to log on to unitedintentions.org, a virtual community where you learn to create, track, and manifest your passions, one intention at a time. Have a wonderful day, and until next time, live life with intent. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.